Whole time, God is like, I didn't do nothing yet. Like, I didn't do nothing. And the enemy is just like, yep, that's my dupe. And you loving it. And it's just like, don't let that be. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Crowned and Called podcast. If you are new here, welcome. I'm Brianna Lynn, and today we're going to dig into what happens when the devil sends a dupe, likely known as a counterfeit, before the real thing. I did this series, I did a video like this on TikTok a while back, and I think it spoke to a lot of people. So I wanted to run it back in depth for today's episode. Have you ever looked back and realized that you were praying for something that God never sent, but the enemy gladly did? Yeah. We're going to get into that today. Let's talk about it. Okay, so today you're going to hear me say dupe a lot in today's episode. And what I mean by dupe in this episode is a spiritual counterfeit. So oftentimes I believe that a counterfeit comes before the real thing. It's to derail us, it's to throw us off, get us off track, get us out of position, and to ultimately lead us astray. The enemy doesn't always show up in obvious evil. It's not always corruption and things like that. He loves to kind of show up in like an imitation. Like he loves to imitate. So the things that we are praying and asking God for, he will often try to imitate to make it look like everything we've ever wanted. And it's the last thing that we need, right? So, you know, the quote that goes, the devil won't show up in red horns. He'll show up as everything you've ever wanted. That plays perfectly into this whole spiritual counterfeit dupe situation. Scripture states in 2 Corinthians 11:14 that he masquerades as an angel of light. So he likes to parade around as if he's not bad, as if, if he showed up, it was just like trying to scare us or, showing up in obvious destruction and evil, like it'll be easier to turn away from that. But just like he always tries to mix a little bit of truth in with a lie, he'll try to imitate what it is that you're asking God for and give it to you on a silver platter. It's real slick. It's real sly. Okay. And so it's important to know that a good thing doesn't always mean a God thing. And that is something I think it's really important to take heed to, whether it's a job opportunity, whether it is a career move or a person, a thing, whatever it is. Like it can look good and it can play as good for X amount of time, but it doesn't mean that it was ordained by God. So in one of the previous episodes, I spoke a lot about how like my previous relationships, they were good guys. They didn't treat me bad. They didn't cheat on me. They weren't disrespectful to me. Like they were good people, but it didn't mean that they were ordained by God. And that's what I was supposed to basically be in. So why do dupes work so well? What is it that draws us to these counterfeits, to these dupes of what it is that we really want? And oftentimes it's because we're tired of waiting. God, I've been praying to you for a husband for 10 years and it hasn't came. So you know what? This is close enough. This is good enough. Maybe I'm being too picky or, maybe I've just kind of been waiting for someone to check off all my boxes and this isn't it. Maybe God is telling me that I should kind of settle for this because, it's close enough. This has to be from God. Like maybe I'm the one that's tripping. So as we grow weary in our waiting, it's so important to make sure that in that time we're drawing near to God and then we're staying close to God, because as we get tired, it's so easy for the enemy to slide in there real slick. Like, you know what? This is what you've been praying for. Look, I'm going to give it to you. Whether it's a guy or a woman, they're everything that you ever wanted on paper. They look good, and it's easy for you to say, yeah, this must be it. This must be the one. It speaks to our flesh, and a lot of times it speaks to our brokenness. I believe that what God has for us is going to hit way deeper than just our fleshly desires, or things that speak to our trauma. You may have someone who you can't stop drooling over. And here's the thing, y'all. I don't want to discourage y'all, because this, even to this day, sometimes discourages me. But I see God ordained couples. Well, it looks like, from what I can see, that God is in the center of their relationship and God brought them together. And they're like, yeah, they weren't my type on paper when I first saw them. But as I got to know them, basically, I realized that they were everything I have been praying for. And it scares me, because y'all know how the conversation goes, where it's like, I don't want someone to grow on me. I just want to like them. Like, that's how I feel. And even now, I'm just like, God, please hear my prayer. I just want to like somebody. I don't want to be crazy about them. I don't want them to have to grow on me. And I don't know how those things play out, because that just hasn't been my situation yet. And I'm not engaged or married or anything like that. I'm very much single. So I don't know. But it just shows that they weren't allowing their fleshly desires to lead them, or they weren't someone with mommy or daddy issues looking for someone who spoke to that brokenness or that trauma in them. So when you are in that season and you're waiting, draw near to God. Don't get thrown off by being tired of waiting or allowing things to speak to your flesh or to your brokenness or to your trauma, or convince yourself like it's close enough. Because what God has for you, I believe, will exceed your expectations, even if it has to grow to that point, right? It might not hit right off the bat like that, but you'll wake up one day like, this is more than what I prayed for. And that's what we're waiting on. So Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. Meaning, we don't know what's good for ourselves. And if we aren't tapped in with God, then we are allowing the enemy to lead us ultimately to death. His plan is to steal, kill, and destroy ultimately. So a lot of times it seems right, it feels right, it might check the boxes. But if God didn't send it, then the ending won't be right. And I've seen that firsthand. I've seen someone say, well, hey, God, I don't know if this is what you want for me or not, but I want this for myself. And they're in a marriage that lasts 20 plus years that ends up in divorce. And now they're just like, dang, like I wish I would have waited for what God had for me. So for me personally, I don't know if y'all can relate, but as someone who is going to be 31 next month, and my desire for marriage and family has grown a lot, and that's something I want so bad. I refuse to wait this long just to do it my way and have it ultimately lead to death. And what I mean by death is the relationship can be dead, our love for each other can be dead. Like, it's going to die. It won't last forever. You know what I'm saying? Unless I'm just maybe willing to be miserable for life, or they're willing to be miserable, or whatever the case may be. But in a previous episode, I spoke on how what God has for us will be true, it will be lasting, and it will be aligned. That's what I want. So I would rather wait on that than just have that immediate satisfaction and like, finally I got somebody. Because I've been in long-term relationships that just weren't even it. I'm tired of doing that. So how do we spot a counterfeit? How can we spot it? Like, okay, Bree, if it looks so good, if the enemy hears our prayers sometimes too, for praying out loud, and he can easily slide in and trick us by imitating, how can we tell the difference? How can we spot what's the counterfeit and what's the real thing? So your counterfeit will lack peace, right? It's the opposite of God. God gives us peace. Your counterfeit will lack peace. You'll keep forcing it, justifying it, trying to explain it, but you won't have peace. Right? That was something I experienced in my last relationship. No matter how bad we tried to make it work, there was peace that was missing. It just didn't have that peace. It will come with compromise. So you'll start to lower your standards. You'll start to lower your boundaries or your values. I don't believe God will cause us to compromise in that way. I think that the person that God has for you, the job or the career opportunity that God has for you, whatever the relationship God has for you, even if it's just, platonic, it won't cause you to lower your standards, your boundaries, or your values, because that's what's going to bring you guys together, right? That's what you guys are going to be able to connect off of. Also, rushed timing. We know that God is a God of timing and not time. Look at Sarah and Abraham, how long they waited for Isaac. He's not a God of time. He's a God of timing. So it will push you to move fast and to skip discernment. Now, we know those relationships, like, okay, I like to give examples. So when I first moved to Dallas, I started to date, and I met a guy, and I want to say on our second date, which was about a couple days after our first, he's like, I want to exclusively date you. Like, I don't want to date anybody else. And basically, in so many words, he's saying, like, I want you to exclusively date me too. Now, I just got to Dallas. And my plan was to just openly put myself out there to meet people or whatever the case was. Because before that, I had been single for like a year. And so that was a red flag to me. And even after saying that, the way he was moving was just kind of odd. And so rush timing, like I said, it pushes you to move fast and to skip your discernment. It was almost kind of like love bombing at first. And then like he switched up. I want to say that was my first time ever experienced love bombing. And so lastly, it will pull you off your purpose. It'll distract you from what God already told you to do. You'll start to see things kind of clashing. Like, God told me to do this. I feel like this is what I should be doing, but it'll clash. It'll clash, and you'll know when it clashes. So because I like to make sure that everything I'm saying, I'm taking it back to the Bible, because I'm not just giving you my opinions in this podcast. It's literally biblically speaking. So we have Genesis 16:21, where we are speaking about Sarah and Abraham. They got tired of waiting on God's timing. They were wanting a child. Sarah was getting older. Like, they were both getting older, and it was just becoming in their minds very unrealistic for this to still be a thing, even though God promised. So you know what they did? They created their own promise through their servant Hagar. And that's how Ishmael was born. If you don't know the story, basically, Sarah had Hagar sleep with Abraham so that they can conceive a child. That way, it can be, it'll be their child. But gave birth to Ishmael, caused some problems. Definitely tap into Genesis 16:21. Read through that, study it if you don't know it. It's a great story. But the real promise, the child that God blessed them with, their real blessing, that was Isaac. And it came through surrender and divine timing. So we want to make sure that we're not birthing something out of impatience and calling it a blessing. I found my husband, I found my wife, like, they're perfect. Shout out to God. I'm God's favorite. What y'all be saying. All of that. Whole time, God is like, I didn't do nothing yet. Like, I didn't do nothing. And the enemy's just like, yep, that's my dupe, and you loving it. And it's just like, don't let that be. Then we see also another example, biblical example, Jesus being tested in the wilderness. That is in Matthew 4, chapters 1-11. And Satan tempted Jesus with power, influence, and shortcuts to provision. All good things. Who doesn't want power, influence, and a quick way to provision? But it was all in the wrong way. Jesus didn't take the bait, because even good things, right? Take note, even good things out of alignment with God are still traps. There's a reason why God is a God of timing and not time. You get the wrong thing or you get the right thing too soon, it'll be the wrong thing. It'll be too overwhelming for you. Like, I have to remind myself that in this season where God is preparing me for marriage, to be a wife, there are things that he's still pointing out in me every day where I'm like, oh, I need to fix that, right? And my future husband, it could be things that God is still pointing out in him every day as well. It could be things that we haven't even went through yet, that God knows we're going to go through, that could literally make us into better people for each other, or that we just need to go through before he brings us together. I believe that there are times when God will take you through things that ultimately will change your appetite, making the person he has for you what it is that you've been wanting, or that you need, or that you realize that you want or need all along. And it'll be like, dang, like before this happened, I would have never thought like I would have wanted to date somebody like this, but now like this is my type. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just interesting how God works. And we need to wait on him. So I gave you biblical examples with a little mix of my own business in there. And I really just thank God ultimately for just what he blocked and what he exposed, when I may have stepped into it. Uh, it just, I look back now, and there was a time where I had regrets. Even in this most recent, separation I had regrets. I'm like, dang, like, was I too harsh? Should I have been more understanding? Like, whatever it was. But now I look back and I'm like, seeing all the red flags. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, thank you, God, for opening my eyes. Thank you for moving me forward, because that just didn't align with my values. It didn't align with who God was preparing me to be. And I can see that now, because all this time, these past 11 months, God has been rebuilding. He has been breaking me and preparing me, and I'm changing gracefully internally. I could see it more than anything. And I'm just like, you knew what you was doing. Like, you knew what you was doing. And that feeling feels so good. So let go of shame. If you were misled, if you got if you tapped into that spiritual counterfeit, let go of that shame and just let the lesson sanctify your discernment going forward. One of my favorite things to pray for is discernment and wisdom and knowledge, because you'll know someone by their fruits. So stay in your word, stay close to your God, your heavenly Father. That way you can lean and tap into that discernment, and you'll be able to identify that counterfeit, right? It won't delay the real thing that God has for you, because I think I saw somewhere where it was saying that counterfeits, they do kind of delay you from what God has, because he's about to come through with it, but then the enemy comes with the counterfeit. I'm just like, so you're telling me maybe I could have been married. Like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's fun to share. I'm just kind of like, dang, like, I hope that's not the case. So the real won't require you to force it. Remember that. And it won't contradict what God has already spoken. A lot of the desires that we have in our heart is simply because God's placed it there. Your desire to be a husband, a wife, a business owner, a good friend, like whatever the case may have been, God placed those desires in your heart because it's going to come to pass. So know that what God has for you will not contradict what he's already spoken over your life. Isaiah 55:8-9 says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. And you'll hear that a lot throughout this first season, because I reiterate it, I go back to it a lot. And in this discussion about this counterfeit, I feel like it goes so well, because our timing is hardly ever God's timing for our lives. His timing is better, right? Like I said, the right thing too soon could be the wrong thing. So allow him to lead you and guide you. And remember that just because you don't understand the delay in his timing, it doesn't mean that he isn't being intentional. In fact, he's being very intentional, which is why it's possible that there is a delay. His plans won't always make sense to us. They won't always look like our plans that we've had for our life, but they're always better. And I hope that you find rest and comfort in knowing that he will never withhold a good thing from you. And that if he's making you wait, it's for a reason. His timing is better. His plans are better for us. And Don't get tricked out your spot. Don't let the enemy get you out of position, coming through with that dupe, that spiritual counterfeit that is never going to be as good as what God has for you. So I hope that this episode resonates with you. Please take it back to God in prayer. Ask if this is your word. Ask Him to give you discernment, wisdom, knowledge, and even strength when it gets hard to wait on His timing. So, thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope that you guys are doing well as you guys are following along in this journey with me. I hope that this entire series so far has spoken to you. Please make sure that you leave a comment. Tell me about a time when the devil sent you a dupe and you thought it was the real thing, or what you've learned from a situation like that, or even what you're just learning by being patient and waiting on God's timing. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment. Please subscribe. Share with someone who you feel can relate to this, and turn on your post notifications, your bell. I will see you guys on the next episode.